So this is our This Week in Woke. We've got another angry baby. I'm enjoying looking up angry babies online. So you might get, no, that one's not me. No, I'm old enough that's way too high def for any of my baby pictures. But this is so an angry child I thought would be appropriate for this evening. We've touched on, my mom's laughing too much. I don't she can't stop laughing. Yeah. Mom was there when I did that, apparently. Yeah. Hey, thank you, Eric. Eric's not a pediatrician. He's not ready to say whether or not that's a baby. He doesn't know the science. Yeah. What does science say? Well, gender law theorists will tell you. Okay. Anyway, I picked a child because we're going to talk for a few moments again about family issues in this woke universe. Inside of the umbrella of critical theory, we have all kinds of different branches of study and application and what is in this world called praxis. So there's study and there's praxis. So we study things, we learn things, and praxis is the application of those things, the doing of those things. So underneath the umbrella of critical theory, you've got critical race theory, you've got all kinds of other things. We're using the term wokeness to describe all of that. One of the other things underneath that umbrella is queer theory. And that's a real thing. It's dominant in not just a lot of academic circles, but a lot of political circles as well. You and I tend to see it in headlines in terms of gender-affirming therapy, transgender issues, and so forth. And we're seeing it more and more. I told you this was coming months ago, and we're watching it happen more and more. The normalization of pedophilia. It just keeps rolling down the track. All of this is queer theory. All of this is critical theory. All of this is in the books and articles they published 100 to 50 years ago. So this has been brewing for a very long time. And given a couple of things, it's made its way into the administration's documents. So I just thought this was a great little screenshot of a headline. Focus on parental rights chips away at gay rights. The radio host Rush Limbaugh used to talk about who's going to win the intersectional Olympics, meaning who gets to claim the most rights over everybody else's rights because they have the most oppression inside of their lives. Well, we talked a little bit about that this last week and some other weeks as well. Parents trying to stop certain curriculum inside of schools, parents at untold numbers pulling their kids out of public schools, finding other ways to educate their kids. A lot of these types and a lot of those inside the administration are pushing back against that. And in these weird kinds of ways. And they're saying things like, if parents have the right to raise their kids with their morality, it conflicts with what we think is sexual morality, so we need to put these kids inside of our schools to teach them what we think is right and true about human sexuality. So you get very serious-looking people, sitting around talking about these kinds of things. Not that long ago, maybe a week and a half ago, the Biden administration, he actually, in press conference, he announced some new guidelines that his administration is putting forward for federal agencies and suggestions for other agencies and so forth regarding gender-affirming therapy, so regarding transgendered issues. I went and I read a couple of the documents that came out. The announcement is made, and what that means is that all of these federal agencies have these documents ready to publish and to implement because now we've got some sort of official policy to just come forward. So this is out of one of them. So both of these documents come out of the Department of Health and Human Services. So this gigantic department in the federal government, the HHS, okay, so kind of a big deal. They give a lot of guidelines, but inside of the HHS, there are all of these sub-departments. This document comes out of this sub-department, the Office of Population Affairs. Now, does that make everybody feel calm and comfortable? literally Orwellian. It's literally like it would have come out of 1984. So I had no idea my tax dollars were somehow funding the Office of Population Affairs. I would be shocked what my tax dollars are funding. I had an old friend who attended church here for a very long time. Some of you probably remember him. For a while, he worked for the federal government. If you asked him what he did, what he said was, the federal government spends money on fraud, waste, and abuse. I'm waste. That's my job, is I'm waste. This document is a couple of pages long, giving guidance on what is, again, this Orwellian tile of gender-affirming care and young people. So what do they mean by gender-affirming care? So it's taking little kids to teenagers to young adults and how they might feel about their sexuality and what to do with it. And they put the care or the therapy into these 4 categories. So affirming care begins with social affirmation, adopting gender-affirming hairstyles, clothing, name, gender pronouns, restrooms, and other facilities. Now, when would you use social affirmation? You would use it at any age, reversible or not. I love that word, reversible. I don't think that word means what they think it means. So if you and your family and your child's social network affirmed what is in the end self-destructive and psychologically harmful behavior for that child for years on end, would you just label that, it's reversible? We can change that tomorrow. Maybe Monday it's different. So we'll change. I don't think it's reversible in the way that they mean. It's going to come with plenty of harm. You've done bizarre psychological harm in a small mind. You've created a social pariah. It's just, reversible is the wrong word to describe this. Puberty blockers, using certain types of hormones to pause pubertal development. When you use it during puberty, reversible or not, reversible, I'm afraid that that's just literally wrong. So the act of a boy or a girl hitting puberty does significant things inside of their body. It's not just one hormone that's released, it's an entire change inside of that person. You block that, and the theory is that, well, if they're confused, we need to hold off until they make a choice, and then we can either continue the puberty blockers or we can remove them. Well, there's significant damage that's done when you put kids on puberty blockers and you stop the natural process, including, if it goes on too long, sterilization. So you can actually remove that child's ability to have a family later on in life if you give them puberty blockers. So again, to call it reversible is political. It's not science, it's politics. Hormone therapy, testosterone hormones for those who are you got to love this language, it's just assumed now. Assigned female at birth, estrogen hormones for those who are assigned male at birth. There's going to come a day, if Jesus tarries and history lasts long enough, there will be libraries filled trying to make sense of the insanity of this culture right now. Estrogen hormones for those who are assigned male at birth. When early adolescence onwards, partially reversible. It's a political answer. It's not a scientific answer. It's not psychological. It's political. It's a political answer. Gender-affirming surgeries. You got to love the Orwellian language here. Top and bottom surgeries. Yes, ma'am. There are people in the system that are pushing back against this. So this, this kind of thing doesn't come from Congress, right? This is just administration paperwork. But we find and we hope for and we pray for these individuals who try to bring a degree of sanity into the system to pull this kind of stuff back, because this kind of stuff, the more it's implemented, the more we're destroying young people, psychologically and physically as well. I have run across the photos of post-operative, what's called phalloplasty, turning a girl into a boy. What they do, and I haven't shown these pictures because they're just disturbing. They're really disturbing. So the standard process is you remove the skin and the flesh from the wrist to the elbow to recreate another part on a girl. And so afterwards, if you can just imagine the bone, and then you've got the flesh back on the elbow. So they've removed the muscle, they've removed tendons, they've removed skin, they've removed everything from elbow to wrist in order to do this, okay? So it's not just a minor little surgery. That's the bottom surgery. Top surgery, bottom surgery, typically used in adulthood or case-by-case adolescence. It's used in more 16-year-old girls than you would imagine. And of course, it is not reversible. So these are the guidelines that are now coming out of the administration. So the Office of Population Affairs is somehow involved in all of this. And then another organization inside of HHS, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, put out a longer paper. It's about 14 pages long. It's not horribly long, but this is on the first page. So providing gender-affirming care is neither child maltreatment nor malpractice. So they're just telling you that. So again, we talked about this last week. What's the move? The move is appeal to authority. Just listen to us. We just know that this is true. So what they mean is affirming sex change is not malpractice and it's not child abuse. The child welfare system in the U.S. is charged with improving the overall health and well-being of our nation's children and families, should not be used to deny care or separate families working to make the best decision for their children's well-being. Who gets to decide who's making the best decisions for their children? There's no scientifically sound research showing negative impacts from providing gender-affirming care. That's just a flat-out lie, okay? That's just not true. The decision for the child welfare system to become involved in the lives of families, potentially to the extent of removing children from their families and homes, needs to be thought through a lot. But you shuffle that inside of an official document, inside of the federal government, and what are you setting up? You're setting up the excuse to step in and remove kids from families if families don't follow these guidelines. On page 3, one of the guidelines says that you can't tell a child no. You have to affirm everything. So the guidelines, just 2 pages from this point on, tell you there's really only one answer to all of this, and we're going to tell you what the best interest is of your child, right? So this stuff all just landed, bam, like a week and a half ago. And I don't know, I just still can't get over the Office of Population Affairs. I mean, it shouldn't make us feel, that's pretty Soviet. That's exciting, though. Doing this, and we've talked about this a couple of times, and so I want to make sure that we think this through, again, biblically. How might we think about this? How might we find ways to respond to these things? Biblically speaking, when we talk about the family and the structure of a family, it is the very first institution that God created. Every other social institution is theologically and socially after the family and the individual. Theologically, God intends everything else to be an extension of the authority of the home and the structure of the family. Families grant other people their kids for a little while to educate them to do X, Y, and Z, but all of it in God's vision theologically belongs to the family and to the individual. Every other authority out there in institutions comes from God through the family and individual to another institution. So when an institution wants to, play the role of God, it removes God and it begins to lay these kinds of authorities and dictates upon the family. So in any state, concocts reasons to overrule the family is usurping God's role in the family. And this happens every time there's one of these radical revolutions around the world. Movies are made about these kinds of things. But they get memory hold, right? And nobody knows them anymore. Nobody knows what the Khmer Rouge did. Nobody knows how Mao separated kids from their families and actually used kids to execute their grandparents to, X, Y, and Z to move the revolution forward. People just don't know these things anymore. I've got a couple of quotes for you from Rod Dreher's book, Live Not by Lies. If this kind of stuff interests you, it's a wonderful book. It's well-researched. and he's got a lot of information about how these things happen, as well as the second half of the book essentially is how we as Christians might actually respond to this, live inside of this world, so that we can, bring the light of Christ and the kingdom of God into this world. In the process of writing this book, he interviewed a bunch of survivors and the kids of survivors of the Soviet bloc in the mid-20th century. So a lot of dissidents from Poland and Czechoslovakia and Russia itself. And so what did you do? What did your family do as Christians when you were not allowed to worship, when you're not allowed to do X, Y, and Z? What did you do? How did you survive? How did things happen to you? So one of the more interesting individuals, Václav Benda, was a Catholic Czech dissident, and he said this: a left-wing intellectual terror achieved what it wanted. Marriage and the family became extremely problematic institutions. Czechoslovakia in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. That's when this guy and his family live and endure and come out the other side. And he sees it. A left-wing intellectual terror achieved what it wanted. Marriage and family become difficult things to have inside of our culture. The daughter of another dissident, she puts it this way: it is no accident that every dictatorship always tries to break down the family, because it's in the family that you get the strength to be able to fight, says Maria Komaromi, a Catholic teacher in Budapest. You have the feeling that they have your back so you can go out into the world and face anything. It's just as true today as it was under communism. There's a unique kind of strength inside of a family that resists these kinds of intrusions, that resists these kinds of worldviews, which is why these worldviews constantly are at the family, they're constantly after the church, they're constantly after all of these other kinds of institutions that hold people together. This is the kind of thing we talk about for a very long time, but as Christians, as followers of Christ, and in a world where there's more and more assault on the family in all kinds of different ways, understanding that family is God's gift to the culture. So what we do, one of the things we do is we double down on the value of God's design for family, for the family that we have. We just double down on the value of that. This is important stuff. This is where we find a unique kind of belonging. That Václav Benda wrote a bunch of essays, and I've gotten to catch a few glimpses of them here and there. And he said something really interesting about the family versus the state. He said the family is the only place where your role is not replaceable. So you always have that role in that family, but the state can replace you at any moment. You're just utterly replaceable. You're disposable and replaceable, but there's something unique about the family that puts you in a unique and powerful place. A family is a spiritual gift to our community, and the science backs it up. Strong homes, strong families. It's good for kids. It's good for grandparents. It's good for household economics. It's good on every measurable outcome possible. So a family is not just a good economic gift to a community. A family is a good, stable, spiritual gift to a community as well. It's a unique kind of stability. And then we're ready to make sacrifices for the value of family. And I know parents do this, grandparents do this constantly, right? Making sacrifices for family. And these are, relatively extreme examples, but we go back to some of those people interviewed in that book, the Bendas and some of the others. So inside of those societies, if you did not join the Communist Party in Czechoslovakia, you could lose your job you could lose your business if you owned a business. You were only allowed to have certain kinds of jobs. Your kids could not go to school past a certain age, and you were not allowed to travel outside the country, right? Those are just four of the consequences of deciding I'm not going to join the party. So you realize, for the sake of my family, for the sake of our integrity, I'm just going to make some sacrifices. So realizing that God's family structure is the foundation for every other structure in society and culture, we find the value in that, and we think, okay, then we're ready to treat it as if it is actually this important, right? Even when we get these crazy things given to us. from the Office of Population Affairs. I still can't get over that. I still can't get over that.